Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 145. Following on from my conversation with Desmond Bovey last time, my guest today is another New Zealand artist, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and connecting with Jennifer Duval-Smith. Jennifer has a really interesting perspective and story because she started her career in a corporate environment, and then after articulating the things that were really important to her as being nature, creativity, and connection, she changed her life and her career to become an artist and nature journal educator. In our conversation, we talked about this big career change, as well as nature journaling within a corporate setting, the pitfalls of perfectionism, the differences between botanical art and nature journaling, and how Jennifer finds her place in the middle ground between the two. Let's listen. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to learning more about your story.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to put a face to the name, and we've connected, a little bit here and there over the years in a really rewarding way. So thank you for asking me aboard.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it interesting to have these relationships online that are in one form, which is usually in the written form, and then for someone to come alive on a call and to hear your voice and to see your face, it's wonderful.
It is lovely. It's lovely.
So I would love to go back in time and just hear more about the beginnings of your story, especially early connections with nature and with creativity. Can you tell me some things about your early connections with these beautiful things?
Sure. You've caused me to go back and really reflect just in asking that question, because I've heard you ask other people on earlier podcasts, and and it's been really pleasant to think about how these different influences can come together to form your appreciation. I think as a family, we've always noticed natural detail. We aren't especially artistic. My grandmother was a landscape watercolour painter. But all I really got from that was the sense that watercolour was too hard and one shouldn't attempt it unless one really knew what one was doing. That didn't necessarily come from her, but it certainly came through. And there was a strong sort of anthroposophical influence as well. And whereas we didn't go to Steiner schools, there was a lot of that, I suppose, those themes coming through. So we would know what the names of the little butcher boy larvae were, or we would notice when the fledglings were coming out from a particular species, or it's almost a family joke how interested and committed my mother is to the concept of colour. And so these things percolate through, I think. And we lived in a few sort of different places, and so we got to appreciate that nature was different in different places. We moved around quite a lot when I was a child, and we lived in Fiji for 3 or 4 years, so we would see cane toads and different coloured birds, and just feel the differentness of sinking into a different place, and also that sense of a homesickness for the elements of an environment that were very familiar to you. And so, that's certainly, that's part of what has, I guess, a combination of things that have come through to make me continually interested in nature.
I'm so fascinated by this feeling and this idea that what we are familiar with, like you said, the environments, and it might not be a conscious understanding, it's a feeling for me, but it's very much like the place that you grew up, the trees that surround you as you're running outside as a child. The things in nature that are familiar form the base of what you love. And that idea that the landscapes of our early lives sort of percolate into us, you know. And I'm interested because you talked about the different landscapes, but for many of the listeners of this podcast, the New Zealand landscape is probably quite different for them. And I would love to hear you speak about what the New Zealand landscape is to you and the flora and fauna that are unique to New Zealand, and how would you describe that to someone who hadn't been there or experienced it?
It's a really good question, because New Zealand is made up of so many different landscapes. I mean, as you'll know from having been here, there's such a difference between north and south. You know, like Chile, we're a long, thin country, and so we're currently, they call us subtropical, but right now it feels very tropical. Whereas I was born in Christchurch, which is perhaps, I guess, more English in its feel, and so I think, as Des Bovey said the other day, the preponderance of that bright green is very essential to my sense of being able to relax and feel at home. And it's a shock to me sometimes, for example, to come to Australia and go, it's very, it takes me a while to start to appreciate the subtleties. And then I get into the protea family and the amazing wildflowers. It doesn't take long, but it's not necessarily my heart place in that sense. So I think there's a very, colonised feel. Certainly as Pākehā or white New Zealanders, I think in some ways we perhaps inherited the idea that certain plants were superior to others, and the stories that we read about when we were very small children involved a lot of European trees and European plants, and and so there is a sense, say, when you go to England, of, oh my gosh, here are these things that I've read about all my life, a real delight in those. And yet as I suppose get older, I really enjoy learning more and more about the native plants that we have available to us, because their very uniqueness is so fascinating, and because there is a deeper element of indigenous knowledge around those plants that I feel like we've only scraped very lightly across the top of Mātauranga Māori. And I'm a curious and eager listener, and that is something that I would like to focus on more in my work as we go along. I love medicinal properties and traditional uses of certain plants. There's one plant on our maunga, our mountain nearby us. It's called Maunga Fo, Mountain of the Fo, and the fo tree is very, very light. It's a native of the hibiscus family, and it was used for net floats and things like that. So to me, that's endlessly fascinating.
Yes, beautiful. I love that you spoke about that, and there's so much to learn, and just listening and learning is a lifelong experience, and I love that you've devoted yourself to that. And that you said heart place. I think that really resonates as something that's true. The landscape of the heart is so important. And for me, New Zealand, if I think of New Zealand flora, the first thing that comes up is the fern. And those beautiful ferns in the forest are so unique and grand. And on our recent trip, another plant that I really connected with was the Pahudakawa tree, which was flowering and spectacular.
And it's weird seeing those plants out of context. So the Dixonia, the tree fern, for example, the last 30 years has become very popular in warmer parts of the UK. So you see that in Cornwall, and you see it in different places, and it's not what I've travelled for, and it feels very odd to see them out of place, as it might, I don't know. Another example maybe is Agapanthus, which is a pest here in New Zealand and possibly in Australia as well. The Australian comedian Geraldine Hickey does a fantastic routine about the difference between people who have and haven't dug out Agapanthus.
But I had this very strange experience where I went to the local subtropical rainforest, which is very close to here, but it was soon after the COVID experience, and everyone had been diving into like the world of houseplants. And I went into the rainforest, and I had this experience of seeing some plants and thinking, what are those houseplants doing out here in the rainforest? forest, which struck me as a very odd thought, but that was what came to me.
It is an odd feeling, and I think, I mean, our bush is very dense and very rough. We do like to tramp, to do bushwalks, and we did a lovely one, did the root burn at Christmas with our boys, which was a lovely experience. And the one thing I find is that generally, if you observe your bushcraft well and you're well prepared, you should be okay. I mean, the bush isn't out to get you, whereas, say, in sort of the Daintree, I did a visit to the Daintree once where I was warned, that if I touched that plant, I'd probably run away and go mad and die. And so I think New Zealanders, maybe we feel a bit smug or perhaps overly comfortable that generally our bush isn't out to get us. So it adds to a level of comfort.
That is hilarious. When you said the bush isn't out to get you, I was thinking, huh? Yeah, isn't it? Yes, you're right. In New Zealand, you can walk barefoot without worry. If we see a patch of long grass, the first thought is, okay, be careful of snakes.
That's right. That's right. This might be a little long, but I had in my corporate life, when I was working for a marketing and PR company, we had to, the company we were working with had done a study to show that people shouldn't commit their ad budget to Australian agencies. They should keep it in New Zealand because Australian audiences and New Zealand audiences are so different. And one example that they used was, say you were going to sell a Toyota Hilux, for example. In New Zealand, it's, hey, this car gets you out doing what you want to do faster, better, more easily. And the Australian ad was, you're in the desert, you're going to die. The only thing that exists between you and death is you.
Is this vehicle. That's so funny. Wow. Yeah, the mindset is so different. In so many ways, we are very similar. And in a lot of nuanced ways, we're different. Yeah, I like it. So you mentioned the corporate life, and I would love to develop that with you because I know that in your history you've made a big change. You had a corporate career and then you made a shift to art and teaching, and I would love to hear that story, the trajectory of your professional life.
Sure. Well, I think I was someone that did reasonably well at school, and I think the expectation if you do well at school is that you're not necessarily going to go into the arts. And so I found myself sort of coming out of university with a law degree, and at that stage I didn't realise that you don't have to finish everything that you start, and it has served me quite well. However, I perhaps could have taken a clue from the fact that my arts results were always a lot better. I'd never painted, but we'd always made things. And I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert or perhaps Brene Brown who talked about art scars and art trauma. And I have a very clear memory of a teacher holding up one of my drawings and saying, not like this.
Oh, no.
And it gave me a great understanding as I came along, because I realised that everybody has these, or most people have them.
Yes.
And I continued on in my corporate career. When I came out of law, there were no jobs available, and I would have been a fairly average lawyer anyway. And so I ended up in events and PR and marketing, and that was a sort of a 25-year career. And it really gave me so much. I learned so much through it. But I also felt that going into those environments it necessitated a kind of masking up, a kind of loin girding to get in there, and that I was effectively mimicking what somebody would do who was in PR or, marketing. And you can get quite good actually by mimicking. You can get really good. I mean, we had our own company, in fact, employing quite a few people. But there was a time we'd sold our company and we'd worked inside the belly of a big beast, a big international agency, and for 3 years, and there were a whole lot of factors came together around that time. I had 3 children. It was pretty tough. I think it's pretty tough for anybody, even an organised person. And in there somewhere also I got ill. I got a breast cancer diagnosis. And so that's all fine and well as far as we're aware, but it did cause me a significant life shift. And so the drawing and the painting that I had started doing for my own benefit became a more central part of my life. And then I started to reach out and make contacts. I did a little online course that sounds terribly corporate, but I think it was a Brene Brown course where we had to define our values. And I found out my values, when did I feel the best? When was I like living in most accordance with my values? The things were nature, creativity, and connection. And none of those were present in my job and in my career. And I thought, I'm going to change that. And so I reached out to people who knew about things, and Sandra Morris, the very well-known New Zealand illustrator, was a wonderful mentor. Leslie Alexander was another one who has been very important to me in encouraging me to paint and to reach out. And so I moved into a phase of looking at life more creatively and trying to form more authentic connections with people. I discovered botanical art, and then I discovered nature journaling. And I think I probably sit somewhere in the middle, because I really adore the finished nature of botanical art. But as Sandra said to me once, if I spent 850 hours on every painting, how many more would I have left in me? And I really love that. So I describe my school of painting as the bog-on-in school of painting, just give it a go.
Yes.
And I love the relaxing nature of nature journaling. I describe it as that vagal nerve feeling, that feeling that you might get from really good yoga or a massage or something. And I get that feeling from half an hour scribbling and painting inaccurately in my sketchbook. And then, to my surprise, I found I also got that feeling from teaching other people to connect with their creativity. And that was fascinating to me, because I expected to be a terrible teacher. and I may be, but I still really enjoy it. And so, because I still needed to earn a buck, I used my skills from the corporate life, my marketing and PR skills, understanding what companies want or what organisations like Botanic Gardens need. And I started to form a patchwork or a portfolio of different opportunities to earn a little bit of money. So I do the Auckland Winter Garden Sunday Art Series, which is a series of events based around different plants, which is really fun. And I'm very lucky to be in with the Winter Garden. They're such a wonderful team. And I work as an unofficial team member with the Auckland Botanic Gardens. And for the first time, I'm actually teaching a curriculum at a contemporary art gallery here in Auckland.
Wow.
Yes, well, that's very interesting, because you actually have to think, what am I going to teach them next week? And have I got anything left that they don't know? And
they don't need to know the behind the scenes, what goes on in your own brain in between classes.
Yeah, no, that's way too ambitious. So yes, it's so now I have the challenge of balancing that teaching, which I really enjoy, with my own creative practice, because I'm sure do you find yourself that your creative energy can actually go into your teaching as opposed to your own?
Yes, and I think that's a constant balancing act, and I find myself, I can go a very long time without actually practicing art for myself. When I say practice, I don't mean trying to develop my skills in any way. I just mean like putting pen to paper for my own joy. It's hard to find the time for that when you are running your own creative business. And then when I do, I think, oh, this is what my heart needs, and this is what I need to keep going, because it gives you so much nourishment, doesn't it? It sort of gives you the oomph to keep going with your own stuff. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's the nourishment.
Yes.
that you need to get going. And the teaching I still find incredibly rewarding, just in a different way.
Yeah, tell me about that, because I've had the experience in my own workshops where you'll see someone just get it, or just fall into that place of stillness, or just full enveloped in the process, and it's such a joy to see. And I wonder about your experience of that. What is it about the teaching that brings you so much nourishment?
I think because I've come to it later in life myself, I think I relish the opportunity to be a positive role model in being prepared to try things and failing or succeeding slightly better than you think. I'm fascinated by the critical mind and by finding different techniques to subvert the critical mind. And I think it's that sense that you get where either people are really absorbed, or perhaps they suddenly lose that critical veil that sits between them and what they're doing. And my rule is always to say, as per the book that came out recently called Your Brain on Art, I always make sure to say to my class, this class is doing you good, even if you're completely crap at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now tell me about that, because you said before, and I 100% agree, that most adults have their own art wounds that they carry around. And I wonder how you go about guiding people through those, because if someone comes into your class with the intention to have fun and learn something, but they have fear, or they're feeling nervous to put pen to paper, how do you guide them through that?
Well, I think that my philosophy is always that you're not here to produce a finished piece of art. Yes. And I always make sure that people know. And in fact, what I feel that what people need is a space which isn't home and it isn't work, where they can just drop everything. Some of them might only have a cup of tea and eat their chocolate biscuit or whatever. Some maybe only come for the chocolate biscuits. A core component of any art practice. But I think I could not count the number of times that someone has said to me, I can't draw a stick man, or I couldn't even draw a straight line. And my answer is always, well, that's lucky, because you won't find any in here today of those.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. Yeah.
And I'm always struck by people's fear and where it is settled in them, often around 8 or 9. And they'll often express very personal things to me about that, which has been a surprise, but also part of the joy, because that is part of the connection. I had one gentleman come in one time and say, I'd like to do your class, which is unusual for a start, because mostly it's ladies who look a lot like me. And he said, I did watercolour once. It was in the week after my twin brother died.
Oh, wow.
And I was quite overcome by that, but just the sense that he had the sense of his brother's death had created a window in his life where he felt that he could do that.
That's magical.
Not every client is like that, but I just really remember. And I love also, in more direct response to your question, I guide people through by saying that the class is not about drawing, it's about noticing. And most people have an overdeveloped sense of their ability to notice. So they feel confident that they can notice a lot. And so by the time they realize that they don't notice as much as they think they notice, they've noticed more. So we've got them, Bethan. We've got them.
Yes. I'm really interested to talk more about, because you mentioned both botanical art and nature journaling, and I've heard you describe nature journaling as the gateway drug to botanical art. And I think this is really funny, and I'd love for you to develop that idea a bit more. Tell me about nature journaling versus botanical art.
I think that there are certain expectations which come on with botanical art. It's incredibly precise, and so it asks a lot of a person, particularly somebody who's starting out. So I think I think that nature journaling is the gateway drug because it's more personal, it's more casual, it's less exacting, because you can respond in words or pictures or numbers. I've said to people they can respond in interpretive dance if they like, but no one's taken me up on it yet. Because you have that variety of modalities to respond, yes. I think it's incredibly flexible. I've had, you'll probably notice yourself at your classes, you might have 5 people around a table, say. One wants to talk about wind dispersal of seeds. Another one has written a poem about how the pod looks like a boat. The third one has just responded with an amazing sort of fluttery sketch of a flower. And the fourth one is saying, I'm an accountant, what do I do? And yes. And I just put them onto measuring and counting for starters. And so I think the way that it can be moulded to respond to the personality and that where people feel comfortable, I think that's...
Would you say it's safer? What you're describing is a bit of safety in the diversity of ways or modalities, because with botanical art, there's a rule that you don't put shadows in, but there's less, whatever the rules are, there's less rules with nature journaling, and perhaps there's safety in that.
I think it's very accessible. And I think there are a number of tools that can make it more accessible. And I think fewer rules, but also in nature journaling, it is actually a lovely starter way to start understanding about pigment, about water control, about brush control, in a way we haven't ruined a piece of $25 watercolour paper before you've even started.
Never calculate how much each sheet of Archer's paper costs when you buy it. Oh. It's too intimidating then.
Well, I'm a Saunders Waterford addict, but the price implications are the same.
Yes. Well, tell me, because you mentioned that you had this sort of handed down idea that watercolor was too hard. How did you overcome that? Was it the classes you took? What helped you break into watercolor?
Well, I think there was it might have been age and stage, and also having children, it sort of did make me realize that, you have these scripts in your head. Well, I have these scripts in my head, and one of them was a kind of a Victorian one, which was, there's only one way to do things, and that's the right way. And actually, at some point, I realised, there's a million ways to do things, and my way might be fine. And that do it once, do it right? No, maybe you can just do it a couple of times.
I love that, Jennifer. That's amazing. Yes. And I do believe that that's the same experience that I've had, growing older, and just realizing that your view of life when you're younger is very fixed. And as you get older, you realize there's nuance in absolutely everything. And that's a beautiful thing, I think, to realize. Life can be lived in so many different ways. And in fact, your own life can be lived in different ways, and you can change careers halfway through, and you can do it your own way.
You can. And then the other thing that I think is especially beautiful is by stepping outside and not asking what is the rule in this situation, you actually free other people to do the same. Because I find you can spend a lot of time, and I don't know if it's maybe just shifting a lot of schools, but certainly as a young person, I had the habit of thinking to myself, how do I mould myself for this situation so I don't catch attention or, draw attention, say. And then you just, you could read the practices of 6 or 7 different botanical artists that all use different pigments. Their rules are all different. Their brushes are different. Their paper is different. And so you do not make yourself safe by sticking to rules, in my opinion. And so that's something I've learned pretty late in life, I think.
Yeah, that's so interesting. In the nature journal community, it's heard often people say nature journaling is not about making pretty pictures. And I think that this is a really valid thing to say in some cases, but I think that we have to be careful about this because it can be making pretty pictures. And sometimes pretty pictures is the way that someone connects with nature, is the way they fall into that place of flow and of connection, of understanding. And I'm interested in your thoughts about that.
That's a good one. I love pretty pictures, but my writing is appalling. And what I say to people is that what is true is beautiful. So if you are following the truth of what you're looking at, and by that I think I mean as accurate as possible, then it will be beautiful. I think that's all I can really say about that.
That's interesting. And sometimes when you're learning to observe and put accurately on the page what you're seeing, we have these almost like stickers or stamps in our brain of this is what a flower looks like. It's got a circle in the middle and it's got circles around the outside. And when you actually look at something, it can look like a bunch of squiggles or a blob here and a triangle there, whatever it is, but often it's not what that sticker says it is. And when it's an interesting experience to put down all those mishmash of weird shapes that you actually see, and then emerges an accurate drawing, which is something I've always been fascinated by.
It is fascinating. It takes a lot to get past your preconceptions of what the subject matter should be. And I guess those skills of being able to break it down into geometric shapes in terms of what you're looking at, you're not moving your head around too much. Just silly basics really like that have made it a lot easier for people that I've been working with to get an accurate picture. I love illustrators like Sandra Morris who will go straight into ink with their picture. I love the confidence of it and the commitment of it. But certainly I've not been drawing that long and I don't feel like I can get an accurate picture in that way. But I do love the line that you get that comes with experience. Very Sometimes I don't give my workshop participants a pencil, or in the past I've definitely done that and just said, here we go, we're drawing in ink and this is to help free you. But I have since started giving a pencil and a pen and just guiding to people to say, you can use this or this, because sometimes it backfires and the intention with that is to say, we're safe here, we don't need to rub out our lines because all the lines are perfect. And yet that in itself can bring up that feeling of anxiety. So I've since then started offering both of those things. But I do agree that going straight in with a pen it gives a confidence, and it gives a quality to the line that's different from if you've drawn it perfectly with a pencil first and then gone over it with ink. I think accuracy and truth are beautiful, and I think part of the joy I think that has always drawn me to nature journaling is the blemishes and that kind of wabi-sabi quality that nature has. And so I often say to people, the closer that you can get to what you're actually looking at, the more beautiful you will find it at the end. And the other thing I find is that even when people are being very accurate, their personality always comes out in some way anyway. So you can have 8 people drawing the same subject and it will be completely different, even though they might be accurate. So that's something that I celebrate, actually. I think that's the personality of the plant and the personality of the person coming together, which I think absolutely is quite beautiful.
Tell me, when you're making, because some of your artworks are incredibly precise and detailed and obviously took many hours to create, and I'm wondering about your experience of that, of doing botanical art and trying to achieve as close to your subject as you can. What does that feel like to you? What's the experience like?
I think the closest I've got to what you're describing is the work that I did as part of the residency at Auckland Botanic Gardens. And one of the reasons that I was able to get so into the plant was that I was actually working day in, day out on my project and not in my home saying, no, we've run out of bread, or someone just pop a load on, or that ability to really sink in with deep concentration is the most amazing gift, I think. And so the time and the mental bandwidth to actually really get to know a plant, which would involve drawing it, I think, with my artichoke, for example, drawing it 3 or 4 different times in different ways, doing a proper measured drawing with calipers. And it gives me a huge amount of satisfaction to look at it even today. I mean, even though we're meant to be super critical of our own work, and I am, I still celebrate the accuracy, which represented a step forward, because I think we always have that aspiration gap, don't we, between what we can actually achieve and what we would like to be able to achieve. And I'm not sure that ever goes away, or whether it gets smaller or bigger with experience. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
I think I used to be a perfectionist. I did, and I didn't like it, and it stopped me from putting marks down on a page. And I think nature journaling has helped me. It's helped me just do it for the joy. And I don't do really exacting botanical art. I'm able to really appreciate the skill that goes into that. And I have done very detailed drawings. I remember I did a short course, a correspondence course on botanical drawing. And I do remember sitting for many days and weeks doing this one drawing. And I did enjoy it, but then there was also an element of, this hurts me, to sit down and do it again. And I actually have done some detailed commissions for bird drawings and whatnot. And interestingly, I did one drawing, a watercolor painting of a bird of one subject. And then I did the same subject again some years later, and comparing the two, I felt like the second one was much more accurate. But I hadn't done anything to deliberately develop my skills. I think it's something that just shows up when you the more you put pen to paper, the more you use watercolor, those things just develop as you go along. And I really have tried to unbecome a perfectionist, because I think perfectionism, although it's a very useful skill in botanical art, I think that it's something that doesn't serve us well in life. And so I've spent a long time trying to not be a perfectionist. But ironically, by not doing it, by just putting marks down on a page, you get better, you get more accurate in your own way.
Pencil miles.
Pencil miles, exactly.
I do think perfectionism is the enemy, which makes me wonder, actually. I'll probably reflect later on why I've therefore chosen an art form which demands perfectionism. That's one for the therapist. But I think I'm not looking for perfectionism. I'm looking for the most beautiful version of that plant that I can represent, which still has some life force and energy to it. And so I'm happier actually with the painting which has, the energy and the swoopiness or whatever it is about that particular plant, the force of a sunflower as it goes up through that amazing stem and then out through that big heavy head, that kind of architectural structure. I mean, I would rather do a painting in 2 weeks than grow the plant, draw the plant, paint the plant, as some amazing people do. And I think the very best in botanical art, I absolutely revere it. But for me, it's like a pair of jeans that are a little bit tight. I'm the bog-on in School of Art in the middle, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting to reflect on that. What is it about botanicals as a subject? Because there's a whole array of subjects out there, but you've chosen botanicals. What is it about plants in particular that capture your attention?
I've always been around plants. I'm a very keen gardener. My garden is extremely chaotic and messy, and I like it that way. I love edible plants in particular. My focus at the Botanic Gardens was on edible plants, and I like the beauty of plants that might be overlooked. I did a series on root vegetables, which I really enjoyed because of their really jewel colours when they're fresh. During lockdown, I painted a pink beet, and I had to go up to the organic garden and have it sort of fed through the wire in a socially distant sort of way, so that I would have some subject matter
That's amazing
to work on. That was lovely. I think again it's the life force, I think, that draws me to botanicals, and also they do sit a lot more still than a bird.
Yes, that's always a plus.
Because I'm a bit slow, I think. Yes, I struggle perhaps with capturing some of those faster moving life forms. Yeah.
There's something extra about the garden, because you talked about life force, and food gives us nourishment that helps us grow and keep going. We couldn't live without it. And so there's something extra special, I think, about having the things that nourish us on the page. I don't really know how to explain that in words, but I find the garden journaling extra special.
I do too. And one thing I particularly like is that you can see the changes every day. So you can see the berry coming out and gradually it's changing colour, or the physalis, it's developing its little paper shell and try and get to it before the birds do, that kind of thing. And although our seasons are maybe more muted than some countries, that changing season, I think, is very comforting, that sort of sense that things go on and that they're in their right place and they're in their natural part. And there's a whole other conversation we could have about environmental grief and things like that. But those, I think that's for another time, perhaps. One thing I would like to do more of, and I really, really enjoyed, was an opportunity I had recently to teach nature journaling to people who look a little bit less like me. And I was given the opportunity to set up a nature space at a big conference that was held in Hamilton for people who specialise in the addiction area. So they might be psychologists or art therapists or community workers, and sort of 900 people. And I had the joy of being able to set up a space that they could retreat to if they felt too peopled out, and if they would like to sort of learn, say, the 3 prompts of nature journaling as a practice for themselves, or to do with their grandchildren or their care groups perhaps, or even team members. And so that was a huge privilege. I've never been hugged so much in my entire life.
Wow.
And it's really interesting, the difference between the lovely groups that I normally have and sort of having a group of very large chaps coming in with "Don't meth with me" on their t-shirts.
Oh, wow.
And it was amazing who did the most incredible work and how they brought their full souls to it. And I was almost in tears a couple of times looking at some of the work that they were doing, bringing in sayings from their work, bringing in their knowledge around healing, different ethnicities who came through, the experience from different teams who deal with rongoa or Māori traditional practice. And it really felt like a huge privilege to have the opportunity to do that. And I felt like I was actually doing something that was quite useful for people. So that was, I think, the first time it's really felt like an act of service.
It sounds like that particular group of people had, that nature journaling could be a balm in the lives of some people who are going through something heavy and need something to calm.
Yes.
To be calm and be still.
Yes. And also I think there were quite a few people who would talk to me about their neurodiversity and how they couldn't actually be in the conference for longer than, say, an hour because they found it too overwhelming, and they just needed some time to sort of sit and talk and draw and things like that.
You said you set up a nature space. Tell me about that. What did it look like? What did you lay out?
Well, I had very ambitious plans, but effectively what it was in the end was a huge conference room with a massive table, and then all my books, which are very, very heavy to cart in and out, and then a lot of vegetation and skulls and birds' beaks and nests and snails, or just whatever I could find. I did actually rob a couple of traffic islands of some flower heads and things like that. Don't tell Hamilton City Council. And it was quite. So people would come in and they would go, oh,
yeah,
and breathe out, because it's such a conference centre, even a lovely one, is a very sterile environment.
Yes,
and they don't expect to find the sights and smells of, say, certain plants which they associate with good things and with healthy things. And so that was, it was very humbling.
Yeah, so that taps into nature journaling. This is one aspect of nature journaling that's really dear to my heart because of my own history, but nature journaling as a mindfulness practice or a self-care practice, and that's what it sounds like what you're tapping into for those sessions.
And I think there's quite a lot of potential, I think, for group bonding activities, potentially at the corporate level. I'm not sure how far I'd want to take that necessarily. My criteria is that people have to be self-selected and self-directed. So I don't really want to take prisoners with the nature journaling and force people into a situation where they're sort of not court-ordered exactly, but, organisationally required to be present.
Interesting. Yes, yes. That's not what it's about.
No,
yes.
No. So those are sort of some added criteria that I put into situations like that. I don't want people to be forced to be there. I want it to be an opportunity for them to expand rather than to have to endure.
Yes. Tell me, because you have done workshops, you sort of bring nature indoors, as it were, for some workshops, but you've also done workshops outdoors where you have people wandering around in the garden, and I'm interested in those two, the differences between those two experiences.
It's lovely doing them outside because you can really tap into your senses, I think, more significantly. I think doing them outside, I have done a lot of quite a few nature journaling sessions with a carer and a child. I can do children's ones, but I'm possibly slightly less inclined. I like a workshop where you will have a carer who is modelling risk-taking themselves by participating in the nature journaling, and then working alongside the child in a team effort, and then I can walk around and I can guide. The child always sees much more than the adult, which I really love. And I don't know about you, but every workshop I've ever done, I've learned something from someone else. Do you find that also?
100%. And I love that you can have a similar subject and two people will notice two different things, and a group of 10 will notice 10 different things. And especially when you see it through the eyes of a child, especially with the prompt, it reminds me of, I find that children have a very creative way of overlaying one thing with another, and it reminds them of really creative things.
One of my favourites is the opium poppy head. Miss, it looks like the Death Star. Little do you know. Yes, I love that prompt because it's always the craziest prompt, and it's often the most meaningful, isn't it? And it's a real memory hole. I find people's eyes are glazing over, and that I'm in my grandmother's garden.
Yes. And so many childhood memories, or memories of loved grandmothers or something significant in early life comes up with that prompt, which is so interesting and so beautiful to witness as well.
Yes, and I do love the way that children are quite democratic in how that they'll approach a plant. Also, they don't have preconceived notion of what a good plant or a bad plant is, or what's interesting or what's not interesting, and so they I find they're more inclined to spot pollinators, and I always say, "Well, include it." Oh, there's a bug on it. Great, draw it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's the joy.
That is such a beautiful thing to be part of that experience for people. And I was really moved by your experience of the conference and just people coming and having their own meaningful experience that they can then take away and take that, even if it's just a few times, doing that in their own life can make big change.
It can. And also I quite a few of them saw it as an opportunity to, I can do that with my mokopuna. I can connect with my grandchildren like this. So that was a particularly lovely thing. The other part that I think is really nice in groups of people who know each other or who work together is that I think the I notice side of things, it really, I think it really exposes people's different approaches and potentially different qualities. And so I think it's hearing somebody describe what they have noticed just gives you such an amazing insight into what's important for them or the way that they look at things. And so I think potentially from a team perspective, that could be quite useful because we all have our different qualities that we bring to teams. And it's really nice to be able to appreciate something that you hadn't perceived in somebody. There was this really big, tough guy came into the conference room. Like he's twice my size and I'm not small. And he sat down and he chose the smallest, brownest object on the table, which was a New Zealand iris lily pod. It's about 1 inch, 2 inches high, and it divides into 3. And he drew that absolutely beautifully. Like, who knew that he had such delicacy in his enormous hands? And then at the end, he wrote on his questions on I Wonder, he said, "I wonder who will look after it now."
Oh,
and
wow.
I know.
That makes me teary.
I
That's
know.
that's really not something that would come into most minds, but so tender and beautiful.
And of course, this is a group of people who do care for other people.
Yes.
I guess that is their driving force, is their people in their community. But those feelings can come out from all sorts of different people. So I'm endlessly surprised.
Part of your work is that you sell prints and cards and calendars of your beautiful work, and you do markets. And I'm interested, I myself have just started doing markets of my work, and part of the joy of that was the conversations that happen between people who stop at your market stall because they love nature. And I'm interested in your market experiences and how that helps you connect, because connection was one of the things that you needed in your life, and that seems like a great way to connect. Tell me about that.
Well, I often say I won't die rich from participating in markets. I have to say a lot of people are a lot more, I am what I would call admin compromised. So I really struggle to get efficient on these things. But what I really do like is talking to people. And so you do make connections, and then people may buy something they might not, but then quite a few of them will come along to courses as well.
Yes.
Because I'm able to talk about, hey, it's not just for experts. It's not just for people who are artistic, It's for people who are interested in looking and noticing. And I do notice, you may notice this yourself, but I think people really need that third space now more than ever. Life is quite frantic, particularly if most people have to work, there need to be 2 jobs and a family to support the mortgage, that kind of thing. If you have children, they'll take, all the oxygen. And so I do feel markets are a good opportunity to talk to people about what art can do for you in your life. And sometimes it can be a way that a person, and primarily a woman, I would say, not always, would just try and carve out a little bit of personal time for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a book about that recently called The Unicorn Space, which is that we're looking for those spaces in our lives. Yeah,
that really feels important. and I mentioned it before that when you're running a creative business, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do on the computer, and it seems ironic that we're on the computer or behind the scenes doing things to tell other people to go outside when that is also something that needs to be carved out. And I think not just for creatives but for everyone, that little space of quiet time is so important.
And I'm very grateful to you for your work in this area, because I cannot begin to imagine the amount of work behind the scenes with International Nature Journaling Week, but I'm very grateful that it exists. I can point people to it. I've got work that relates to it that I can show people, and I can say, look, you don't need much. You just need a pencil, you need a sketchbook. Yes. You can get those, can't you? Got some coloured pencils, nick them from the kids' pencil case, off you go. and so I'm so grateful to you for that immense effort.
Thank you. I loved seeing your pages last year each day, and the things that come out and the way people interpret the prompts in their own way. Again, it's all so unique to that person, and I loved seeing your interpretation of those prompts.
Thank you. I think you were mentioning to somebody the other day on one of your podcasts about how a nature journaling episode, if you look back at those pages, it just brings you back to such a strong sense memory that you don't get from a photo. So you can feel the hot sun, you can remember the squabble that you were ignoring, or, the dog doing something it shouldn't. And that whole kind of holistic idea of that day just appears.
Yes, that's magical, isn't it?
And I can, of course, put my wisdom down, things like, do not eat the subject before you finish painting. That's my greatest piece of wisdom.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been an absolute joy to hear about your story and get to know you more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jennifer. This one really made me happy. We had a lot of laughs during our conversation, which was a delight. I appreciated Jennifer's humour and also the way she talked about encouraging others to nature journal for the practice of noticing, not necessarily for making a finished piece. I also really enjoyed the description of the conference and setting up a nature space for people to come and have a breather and some peace. Nature journaling can be so important for bringing people home to themselves in this way, and it sounded like it was a really meaningful experience for a lot of people. If you'd like to see Jennifer's work and connect, please look at the show notes and you'll find her website and social media links. You'll also find links to the books that she mentioned and the other New Zealand artists that have been influential to her work. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.